One thing that I want to address now is this question of intellectual approaches to Islam. How do we intellectually address doubts? Does intellectual revival have any place in Islam? So let me tell you a story of the greatest general that the world has ever seen. Who is the greatest general of history? Khalid ibn Walid. Have you heard of the Sahabi? Khalid ibn Walid. He is recognized as, even by non-Muslims, as the greatest, one of the greatest, if not the greatest general of history. And imagine he was able to conquer one of the superpowers of his time, which is the Persian Empire. He was, as the general, he led the Muslims towards conquering Persia. And even he could have, Allahu Alam, but he could have even conquered Rome, which was the second superpower of the time. Persia and Rome. And his military prowess and knowledge was world-renowned by that time. By the time he had finished with the Persians, everyone knew Khalid ibn Walid. He's one of these Arabs with this new religion. And he's conquering everyone. And so he had even struck fear into the hearts of the Romans, because they were afraid that they were going to be next. They were going to be the next ones that are conquered by the Muslims. But, that didn't happen. Khalid ibn Walid's career was cut short. But his life is something that we should reflect on. His life is something we should reflect on. And how he became Muslim is very interesting, and this is where I want to put emphasis, is he had actually been the main person that had given the Muslims defeat in the Battle of Uhud. He was actually the one that caused the Muslims to lose in the Battle of Uhud. And after that, he started slowly having doubts about the religion that he was upon and his alliance with the Quraysh. And he slowly started considering Islam because his brother had become Muslim. And his brother had said something very interesting and very important to him. His brother told him that it amazes me that someone as intelligent as you does not recognize the truth of Islam. Someone as intelligent as you has not recognized the truth of Islam. And so that started to get him thinking that, I do consider myself intelligent. Why don't I see that Islam is the truth? I feel this attraction to the Prophet ﷺ and to Islam, but he wasn't entirely convinced. But then the Prophet ﷺ told or asked Khalid's older brother, Walid ibn Walid, where's Khalid? Where's Khalid? Because someone as intelligent as Khalid should recognize the truth of Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ re-emphasized intelligence, that Khalid is intelligent. He should recognize the truth of Islam. And so this is very important for us to understand how intelligence and being intellectual is correlated with Iman. Because what does it mean to be intelligent? How do we define this? This is very important. It's very important for us to have an understanding of intelligence because our youth, our children, and I'm a father myself. I have 4 boys. And I'm trying to raise them in this world and protect them from all of these attacks. And so how do we define intelligence for our youth such that they're not going to be confused. What are we going to say to our youth when they say, Baba, Mama, why are all the smartest people in the world atheists? Why are all the greatest scientists and researchers and academics, why are they atheists, or why are they non-Muslims? How are we going to answer this question? This is a very easy, obvious question for a child to think. Even if they don't ask it, even if they don't articulate it, maybe they are thinking that. Maybe they are wondering why. So we have to define intelligence. We have to define our own terms. We shouldn't let others define terms for us. We should accept the definition that Allah has given, that the Prophet ﷺ has given for these terms, like intelligence and aql, reason. And there's an amazing narration from the Prophet ﷺ where he is describing the signs of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the signs of the end of time. And one of them is amazing because he says that in the end of time, a man will be complimented for his intelligence. And people will say, wow, he's so intelligent, he's so broad-minded, he's so intellectual, and he won't have any iman in his heart. That's the time we're living in. That's the time we're living in, where the most intellectual and intelligent people, those who are considered to be the most intelligent and the most intellectual, are not Muslim and they have no iman. In fact, they're atheists. They even deny God. So we live in that time, whereas in the past, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was the opposite. You couldn't be considered intelligent unless you had iman. You couldn't be considered intelligent unless you had iman. So now things have flipped. Everything is backward. And this is proven in several different ways. One is the example of Khalid ibn Walid, that the Prophet ﷺ was amazed that someone so intelligent was not a Muslim, was not a believer, had not recognized reality. Because that's what intelligence is. Let's define intelligence. Okay? Intelligence means recognizing reality, seeing reality. And what is the greatest reality? Al-Haq. It's Allah. The existence of Allah. That Allah is Rabb. Allah is the Lord and the Creator. And that we worship Him. That is the greatest truth. So how can you be intelligent? How can you be intelligent if intelligence is recognizing the truth, if you don't recognize Allah and you don't submit to Him as a Muslim and worship Him? And just as a caveat, when I was growing in my understanding of Islam, it's a learning process. So just in case someone is not in a position where they have fully understood and accepted with yaqeen, with full certainty, all the tenets of Islam and Iman, the pillars of Iman, you shouldn't be worried that, oh, well, am I not a Muslim now? Or, ooh, maybe I have left Islam. So any of our youth who are facing those kinds of doubts, just because you have doubts now doesn't mean you're not going to learn more. So you should always seek knowledge and not feel like your Iman is at stake or your Iman is going to be lost just because you don't have full certainty and yaqeen at this time. Everyone is working on their Iman, and as the Prophet ﷺ said, you go through different levels of Iman at different times. You feel different levels of closeness to Allah at different times. So I just want to put that out there as well, without taking away from what I want to highlight and emphasize, which is you cannot be considered intelligent without Iman. And this is what we need to teach our youth, so that they understand from a young age Who are the role models? Who are the role models? Who do they consider intelligent, smart? Who are they looking up to? Are they looking up to atheists, those who deny God, those who deny Allah, those who deny Islam? Or do they have scholars of Islam as their role models? Or the Anbiya? Do they understand that the Anbiya are the most intelligent of all creation? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam. When you read their stories, you can just see their intelligence, their wisdom, their knowledge. And then look at the inheritors of the prophets, which are the scholars, the ulama. These need to be our role models, not only spiritually. This is the problem that we fall into. We say, yes, of course we respect the ulama. We respect Imam Abu Hanifa. We respect Imam Ahmad, Imam al-Shafi, Imam Malik. Of course, we respect them as spiritual, moral guides, leaders, intellectuals. But we don't consider them to be geniuses. We don't consider them to be intellectual role models. This is the problem that we have, where intelligence has been defined for us. And we've been indoctrinated into accepting a definition of intelligence that contradicts Islam and puts Islam in a bad light. Another example is how some of our youth have accepted this idea that you need a leap of faith. To be Muslim, you need a leap of faith because you can't, again, know that God exists with certainty. You have to have a leap of faith. Has anyone heard this expression, leap of faith? It's a Christian idea. It's coming from Christian philosophy. And the idea that they had was that you cannot rationally recognize God. You cannot rationally justify God. You have to make a leap. Blindly. You blindly believe. Because reason and religion are two separate things. They're incompatible. As soon as you leave the realm of reason, that's the place of faith. And as soon as if you want to be reasonable, you have to put faith aside. You have to abandon your faith. This is how they have defined for us rationality, reasonability. We have to redefine these terms in light of the Quran and Sunnah. So what does Allah say about Haqq? Many things. Allah is, in the Quran, constantly refers to قَوْمِ يَعْقِلُونَ. Right? So Allah says, قَدْ بَيَّنَّا لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Okay? We have clarified, بَيِّنَّا, for you, لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ, the signs, our signs, if you reason, if only you were to reason. Okay? إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمِ يَعْقِلُونَ. Indeed, in this are signs for those of reason. Right? إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Ulil albab, meaning those of insight, those of understanding. Allah uses the term ulil abasar, ulil nuha, ulil albab, qawmi ya'qilun, afala ta'qilun. Don't you understand? Aren't you people of reason, reflection? Constantly reminding us that you have to be able to recognize the signs around you, in the world, in the dunya. This is not unseen. The signs of Allah are not part of the ghaib. This is a misconception. This is a misconception that we can't recognize the signs of Allah that point that, yes, Allah is one. Allah is the creator. Islam is the deen of truth. There are signs in the world around us and within our own selves that we have to recognize. It's not blind faith. If you have reason, if you have rationality, then there's only one conclusion: that Islam is the truth. And if you don't recognize that reality, then you can't be considered rational. You can't be considered reasonable. You can't be considered intelligent. So you might say, well, Daniel, why don't you distinguish between a dunyawi sense of intelligence and a spiritual intelligence? Daniel, why don't you recognize that Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein, weren't they intelligent? Weren't they intelligent as well? How can you deny this? But I do deny this. We must deny this. Their intelligence, if they can be called intelligence, is far from complete. They can't be considered intelligent when they see the world around us and they don't reflect and they don't understand that this didn't just come from nowhere. That this is not for no purpose. How can you think that? How can you understand your own purpose as a person? Everyone has goals. Everyone has aspirations in our lives, in our personal lives. Right? You might have a job, you might be going to college, you might be in high school, but you have a goal in life for yourself. How can you, when you're located, when you're within the universe, how can you have a purpose? But the universe itself has no purpose, has no direction, has no end? How does that make sense? Where does your purpose come from? These are the kinds of reflections that a person of reason, rationality, intelligence has to make. The signs are around us. They're not part of the ghaib. They're not unseen. So no, I don't think that Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein are geniuses or they're intelligent. And I studied physics. So at Harvard I studied physics. And some of my professors and advisors were Nobel Prize winners as well. They were considered the top physicists in the world. I talked to them, I interacted with them, I took classes with them. I wouldn't consider them intelligent. The way that I think about their abilities are that they're savants. What, have you heard of the word savant? It means someone who has a very particular skill that's super, super specific. So in chess, for example, you can have a chess savant. Someone who's very, very good at chess. And you'll see them, they have events where there'll be 50 people who come to play chess against one person. And that one chess savant, chess genius, will play all 50 people at the same time, blindfolded, and win 50 games. So this is a savant, meaning this is some unnatural, highly unusual ability that they have in chess. You have savants in video games. They're just at such a high level of ability that no one can match. And in physics, it's the same thing. In physics, it's the same thing. They're physics savants. But remember how we define intelligence. Intelligence is recognition of reality. But who gets to define what reality is? Who gets to define what reality is? Those who are materialists and atheists, they have defined reality as the physical world, the material world, atoms and molecules, they assert, dogmatically, blindly assert that there is no higher reality beyond what we see and touch and feel in terms of atoms and molecules. So according to their understanding of reality, then yes, a physicist, they would consider to be intelligent because the physicist understands or allegedly understands reality because he's or she is able to do physics. But we don't have to accept their definition. We don't have to submit to their definition of what reality is. Why would we? Why would we? Their understanding of reality changes every generation. I studied physics, I studied the philosophy of physics and science. The scientific reality in the time of Isaac Newton is very different than the scientific reality 200 years later when Albert Einstein came. And he redefined physics. And then later it was redefined again. And again and again. Science goes through revolutions. Science changes in big, significant ways. And your entire conception of what is real undergoes massive shifts. We're talking about atoms and molecules. Well, the physicists today, they say an atom is an illusion. An atom is an illusion. That's old talk. That's old science. Now we know the reality is not about atoms. It's about quarks. Quarks, the subatomic particle that they call quarks, and hadrons, and bosons, and the Higgs boson, and so on, all these different particles. That's the reality. And then there are even other physicists who say, no, the reality is strings. It's not even particles, it's strings. That's the reality. So even amongst themselves, there's khilaf. They disagree, even amongst themselves, on what is reality. So why should we accept those who, they're just engaged in speculation, dhann? They have no certain knowledge. But we have certain knowledge. We have revelation. We have the Quran. We have the Sunnah. This is what we should anchor ourselves to intellectually. This is what we should anchor our definition of intelligence. And as parents and educators, we have to plug in our children and our youth into these definitions, into these concepts. We can't let others and other ideologies define the terms for us. We have to play the same game and better than that. So I mentioned why it's so important to redefine intelligence and intellectual revival in terms of Islam for our youth. But also think about da'wah. Think about da'wah. How are we going to invite others to Islam if others think of Islam as stupid, irrational, immoral? How can we invite others and say, accept Islam? We invite you to good. Accept Islam. Allah says in the Quran, Ud'u fi sabili rabbik bil-hikmah wal-maw'idatil hasanah. Invite to or call to the way of your Lord bil-hikmah, meaning with wisdom and good advice. And Allah also says in that same ayah, Jadilhum billati hiya ahsan. Argue with them or debate with them. Jadilhum billati, with what is best. So again, this is a command from Allah. Allah is saying to argue and debate. And Allah wouldn't command us to do something if it were not possible. You see, the thing is that some people today, some Muslims, will say that, look, we have our religion, they have their religion, we are just going to practice and keep to ourselves privately. We don't need to argue with anyone. We don't need to try to convince anyone of the truth of Islam. It's fine. And they can insult us, and they can attack Islam. That's fine. We're just peaceful. We're in our own corner, and we don't need to engage. This is wrong. This is a big problem, because our youth are going to slowly leave, because you can't be told over and over and over again that what you believe and what you subscribe to in your life is irrational and immoral. You can't hear that over and over again and maintain your iman. It's slowly going to cause you doubts, and then you're going to have problems, big problems. And then, like I said, we can't do da'wah. How can we call people to Islam if we don't respond to objections, if we don't respond to attacks? If I come up to you and I start insulting your mother, I start insulting your father, I say that, look, your mother and your father, they're stupid, they're irrational, are you going to say, oh, okay, and walk away and not respond? Not even have the bravery to say, no, that's not true, not even to deny them? No, of course, you're going to be emotional. You're going to say, no, that's not true. Don't say these things about my mom or my dad. How come we don't have that sense of ghairah, that sense of protective jealousy for Islam? How can we allow others to constantly attack and we have nothing to respond with? So it is our duty to have intellectual responses and to challenge our opponents. And we do this first and foremost by defining our own terms and setting the frame of our discourse.